Hello again, Algebra 3. This is going to be section 1.4, order of operations. And probably like I told you in class, this session is going to be pretty short and sweet. So the things that we're going to be looking at are evaluating expressions using the order of operations and evaluating expressions containing variables also using the order of operations. And here's the steps to using order of operations to evaluate mathematical expressions. Okay, so we know it as parentheses, but it doesn't just include parentheses. It also includes brackets or braces. And then another grouping method is this fraction bar. And that fraction bar is for things like this. I'll give you a little example. So something like you have 3 minus 4 on top and a 5 plus 6 on bottom. Before dividing anything or simplifying that fraction, what you need to do is subtract these numbers and then add these numbers. Then you divide those two numbers that you end up with. Okay? So that is also a grouping method similar to brackets and parentheses and other sorts of things. Alright, so after the brackets and parentheses and all that other stuff, what we have here is exponents and radicals. And if you've ever been in my algebra class before, you should know that radicals, are the same thing. You can express it in the same way as exponents. So say we have the nth root of x. Remember, it's the same thing as saying x to the 1 over n power. So 1 over n, that is an exponent. So radicals can be converted to exponents. Alright, so after you do exponents and radicals, next thing is multiplication or division. The reason I put this together is it's not always multiplication then division like the PEMDAS thing that you've learned. Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. Yes, you do that order, but multiplication and division right here, it doesn't necessarily go, multiplication goes first and then division. It just goes in whatever it comes first when you're reading the problem left to right. So that's just a common error I want to make sure y'all know about. So reading the problem left to right, do the whatever symbol of multiplication or division that comes first. And then kind of the same thing with addition and subtraction, but it doesn't matter as much. You can add and subtract two values together and they'll come out to the same thing. But again, you're working from left to right always. Alright, so our first example is not too bad. So let's do that. First thing we're going to do to evaluate this expression is what's inside the parentheses. The 4 squared minus 13. Well, we must square that 4 first, and that's a 16. Then I'm just going to rewrite everything and do the next step. So the next step is going to be evaluating what's inside the parentheses again. So 16 minus 13 gives us a 3. Again, just write everything down. So after parentheses comes exponents, and we do have an exponent. Let's evaluate that. So 3 to the 4th, that gives us 81. And now it's just everything is adding and subtracting, and we get an 82. And we are done. Okay, so we did a simple one. Now we're going to do one that's a little bit harder. Now, I told you we're going to do one with this fraction bar. So what I'm going to do is in each step, I'm going to do a step from the numerator and then move to the denominator. Okay? First thing in the numerator that we come to, do the innermost parentheses or brackets or whatever you have. So the 7 minus 3 is what we do first. And it gets squared. Now let's move to the denominator and see what we can do with that. The first thing that comes in the denominator is the division, because everything else, there's no parentheses, there's no exponents. We have a 9, and then a negative 16 divided by 8 gives us negative 2 minus 4. Alright, coming back to the numerator, let's simplify some more. We got 4 squared, which needs to be simplified first before we subtract a 4 from it. 4 squared, 16. Then just rewrite everything else. And then denominator, let's do some stuff in it. We can do the 9 minus 2 minus 4, which gives us a 3. Alright, now the last thing we can do before we do the exponent in the numerator is subtract, and we get a 12. And that's, I'm going to go ahead and put it in parentheses, or you can put it in brackets, either way, and say square it. Alright, now 12 squared, 144. And then we divide it by 3. That is our last step. And we get 48. So hopefully that wasn't too bad for y'all. Alright, this next example, and then the next one after that, deals with evaluating expressions with variables. And this isn't so bad. All we do when we have a variable, and if we're given the value for that variable, we plug in our x value, which is 5 here, and for all the x values that we see in the expression. So 3 times 5 minus 2 is going to give us a 3 times a 3, which equals 9. And see, we're done. Not so bad. So on to the next example. Alright, so our last example, quite a bit different than the previous one. It got a lot more numbers and squares and parentheses and stuff here to deal with. And also, we have this negative value. Wherever you see, whenever you have a negative value to plug in for a variable, put it in parentheses, okay? And you'll see why here in just a minute. So I'm going to put negative 4 in parentheses and square it. Then again, right here, put negative 4 in parentheses. And so the reason I put a negative 4 in parentheses is because whenever, say you're using your calculator, and you put the negative 4 in parentheses and square it, you are going to get a positive 16, because this is like saying negative 4 times negative 4. Which is a positive number, because a negative times a negative is a positive number. But if you put it in your calculator without the parentheses, what it treats it as is this right here. Which is kind of odd, I know. But it treats it as if the negative is lying on the outside of the 4 squared, which gives you negative 16. And you do not want that, okay? Please just remember, put your negative variables, numbers, inside parentheses. So let's move on. I'm going to go ahead and evaluate that negative 4 squared, and that is going to give us a positive 16 like we already found. And then in this set of parentheses here, what we can do, or go ahead and do, is this multiplication that's right here. Alright, we could go ahead and say 3 times 16, but let's go ahead and put together the negative 8 and the 1, negative 1. So now what we have is a 3 times 16 times negative 9. I've already figured that out. It is negative 432. So pretty simple. This last step is going to give us negative 427. And we're done. So that's all the examples I have for you today. We'll do some more stuff similar to this in class whenever I see you next. So that is it. Bye, you guys.